Airports are places of reunion and farewell, but for me that day, it became the stage of humiliation. My own sister whispered, "You'll embarrass us," as if I were nothing but a weight she carried. I didn't know that just minutes later, the one person I least expected, the pilot himself, would step forward in front of everyone and call for me. The late afternoon light at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport spilled through the massive glass windows, painting the terminal in amber shades. I clutched my worn backpack tightly, the fabric fraying near the zipper, but it was the only piece of luggage that truly felt mine. My sister, Vanessa, marched ahead, her designer suitcase gliding smoothly across the polished floor. She walked like the whole concourse belonged to her. "Keep quiet, Alex," she hissed over her shoulder. "You'll embarrass us if you start talking too much. Just follow my lead." Her words sank like stones in my chest. It wasn't new. All my life, Vanessa had found a way to make me feel smaller, but today was different. We were flying together to New York City, where she had an important business meeting, and I had my own quiet dream of finally showing my portfolio to a small design firm that had agreed to see me. The boarding gate was packed, families hugged before separating, children clutched plush toys, and travelers scrolled on phones with restless fingers. Overhead, announcements echoed in neutral tones, calling names, calling zones, calling order. I stood there, my boarding pass slightly bent from nervous hands. Zone 5, always the last ones to enter. Vanessa glanced at it, her lips curling. "Zone 5? Seriously, Alex? Couldn't you for once do something right?" I wanted to respond, to tell her that it wasn't about zones, it was about getting there safely, but my throat tightened. Instead, I looked out the window where our plane waited, its metallic skin glowing against the fading Texas sky. When the first zones were called, Vanessa's impatience grew visible. She adjusted her jacket, checked her phone, sighed dramatically. Finally, she leaned closer to me. "If you say something stupid in front of people on this flight, I swear you'll embarrass us, and I'm done covering for you." Her voice was sharp enough to cut. Passengers nearby turned their heads. A man in a navy blazer frowned. A mother pressed her daughter's shoulder gently, as if shielding her from the tension. I swallowed hard, blinking fast. For a moment, shame burned hotter than anger. Then, somewhere deep inside, a spark stirred. The gate agent's voice broke through the tension. "Now, boarding Zone 5. We approached. Vanessa ahead, as always, her heels clicking with confidence. I held my breath, handed my pass, and forced a small smile to the agent. She scanned it and nodded, welcoming me aboard. Inside the jet bridge, the air grew warmer, denser with recycled smells of jet fuel and coffee. My chest tightened, not from fear of flying, but from everything unsaid between us. When we entered the cabin, Vanessa immediately staked her claim, pulling her roller bag to the overhead bin and gesturing for me to move faster. She whispered again, venom under her breath, "Don't mess this up, Alex. You're already a burden enough." I froze, my backpack in hand. The rows stretched long before me, strangers watching as we blocked the aisle. My ears rang. I wanted to shout, to ask why she always had to break me down, but silence wrapped around my throat. Then, something unexpected happened. From the cockpit, the door opened. A tall man in crisp uniform stepped out. The pilot. His presence silenced murmurs in the cabin. His eyes scanned the rows, and then landed on me. "Excuse me," he said with steady authority. "Are you Alex Turner?" The entire plane seemed to hold its breath. My sister stiffened beside me, her hand freezing on her suitcase handle. And for the first time in a long time, the weight of her words didn't matter, because the pilot himself had come for me. When the pilot said my name, the aisle hushed like someone had pressed mute on the world. Every zipper, every cough, every seatbelt click faded. My sister's perfectly drawn brows arched in a way I knew too well, equal parts disbelief and control. She tugged her carry-on closer, as if bracing for a scene I would, inevitably, cause. "I'm Alex," I managed, the word catching on my tongue. The pilot, his name tag read Captain Ethan Morales, offered a calm, professional nod. "Mr. Turner, may I have a quick word up front?" There it was again, the strange pull between humiliation and hope. I slipped past Vanessa, Her fingers found my sleeve, a warning touch dressed as concern. "What did you do?" she whispered, smile glued on for the audience. I didn't answer. I followed the captain toward the forward galley, heart skittering against my ribs. The cabin air was warm, edged with coffee and aluminum. A flight attendant shut the overhead bin with a controlled click, eyes sliding between us with curious restraint. "Relax," Captain Morales said softly, angling his voice so only I could hear. "Nothing's wrong." I believed him. Something in his steady tone grounded me, like the way pilots smooth a bump with a few words over the PA. He stepped aside so boarding could continue in a slow, shuffling river behind us, then leaned closer. "We're working a weight and balance adjustment," he explained. "Light load in the forward cabin, heavy toward the back. Are you traveling with anyone who needs to stay beside you?" I glanced over my shoulder. Vanessa was watching like a hawk, thumbs moving on her phone as if she were already writing the post for later. "No," I said. "It's fine." "Appreciate it." His professionalism eased into something more human, almost curious. "You okay? You looked tense back there." I hesitated. "It's been a day. A lot of folks have a day in airports," he said, half a smile. "Let's make yours a little better." He nodded toward the curtain. "I can move you to the bulkhead. Extra legroom up front. It'll help us out, and you'll be settled sooner." "Thank you," I said, the words carrying more weight than he could know. He gestured to the forward flight attendant. "Jordan, seat Mr. Turner in 3A if available, otherwise 4C." Jordan checked the manifest on a sleek tablet and gave me a welcoming, conspiratorial smile. "3A just opened. Follow me." Before I could move, Vanessa materialized, towing her suitcase like an accusation. "Excuse me," she said to the captain, with a polished brightness that didn't reach her eyes. "There must be a mistake. We're together." Captain Morales kept his tone even. "We're simply asking Mr. Turner to assist with a seating adjustment. He'll still be on this aircraft, ma'am." "My brother doesn't need special treatment," she said, voice lowering. "He gets nervous. He talks too much. Please." I felt the blood rise in my cheeks, hot and sharp. Jordan's gaze flicked between us, then settled on me, kind but firm. "We'll take good care of him." Captain Morales let a beat of silence pass, the kind that reorders a room. "We appreciate the help, Mr. Turner," he said to me, a subtle directive to move forward with dignity rather than apology. I nodded and followed Jordan through the curtain. Row 3 felt like a small miracle. A wide seat, clean lines, the kind of space that doesn't ask you to fold yourself smaller to fit. I tucked my backpack under the seat and ran a hand over the armrest, as if touching proof. Jordan leaned in. "Pre-departure water or juice before we push?" "Water's great," I said. He returned with it, and the kind of look people give when they're quietly rooting for you. I stared out at the wash of tarmac lights and the fading Texas sky. The plane's nose angled toward the taxi line. A baggage cart drifted by like a late thought. Somewhere behind the curtain, Vanessa was probably rehearsing explanation, deciding what kind of story to tell about me later. The glassy hurt in my chest didn't vanish, but it did loosen its grip. A soft chime. The cabin door closed with the finality of a chapter turning. Safety demo. Belts clicked. The slow roll of the pushback made the windows tremble with reflected light. As we taxied, I noticed Captain Morales step back into the cabin, pausing at the curtain. He didn't look at me. He scanned the rows with the trained eyes of someone who weighs 100 variables at once: weather, time, people. Then he returned to the cockpit, the door sealing shut with the gentle authority of a heartbeat. Jordan stopped by my seat again as the engines leaned into their growl. "Quick heads up," he said quietly. "We've got some weather stacked over the Appalachian. Might be choppy after cruising altitude." "Got it," I said. "I'm fine with turbulence." He smiled. "You look like someone who keeps sketching even when the lines wobble." I blinked. "How did you—" He glanced at my backpack. "Zippers fray different when the same bag carries something heavy the same way every day. Music gear, laptops, or sketchbooks." He winked, then moved on. I reached for the bag, fingers brushing the worn spine of my portfolio. Miller and Hart Design, the small Manhattan firm's name, stared up from a printed email confirmation. A real shot, finally. A meeting I'd asked for a dozen times until a junior associate, perhaps tired or kind, had said yes. The jet turned, engines deepened, the runway stretched out, a silver ribbon under sodium lights. I tightened my belt and felt the quiet swell of lift as we accelerated. Nose up, Texas falling away in a grid of fireflies. Climb, tilt. The uncanny stillness once the wheels tuck in and the earth surrenders to the dark. Cabin lights dimmed. The world outside turned to ink, punctured by the pricks of distant towns. I took a breath, my first unrushed one all day, a discreet tap on my arm. Jordan knelt to my level, voice barely above the hush of airflow. Captain asked me to check if you're comfortable. Also, he glanced at the aisle and then back to me. He'd like to speak with you once we've leveled off, if that's okay. My stomach dropped, but not with fear. More like a door cracking open in a hallway I didn't know was there. Of course, I said. Jordan stood, returned with a small card moments later. On it, a name and a neat, purposeful handwriting, E. Morales, and beneath it a line that didn't read like formality. Saw your name on the manifest. Wanted to say something earlier at the gate, but didn't want to make a scene. We'll talk when we're steady. My eyes tracked the words again, catching on the first part. Saw your name on the manifest. That could mean anything, I told myself. Common name. Coincidence. Still, the letters pulsed with an energy I couldn't place. From behind the curtain, the clink of ice and the murmur of orders. Somewhere farther back, a child's soft laugh, muffled by headphones. The plane shivered through a patch of chop and steadied. I opened my backpack. The portfolio slid free with a familiar friction. Paper on fabric, the sound of my better self. I traced the edges of a few boards. Airport wayfinding reimagined. Color systems for clarity and stress. Human-scaled signage that speaks softly but clearly. Designs drawn at kitchen tables, at library corners. On days when rejection emails felt like small stones in my pocket. A shadow fell across my hands. I looked up. Captain Morales stood in the aisle, one hand on the seat top for balance, the other holding the bulkhead as if anchoring the space. Up close, he looked younger than his authority, older than his years, the way responsibility carves a face into layers. Mind if I sit a moment? He asked. I nodded. He perched on the edge of 3B while the seat's owner was in the lavatory, then turned to me with an expression that was both careful and warm, like someone setting down a glass on a surface they respect. Alex, he said, voice low. I recognized your name because of an email yesterday from Miller and Hart. He watched the realization move through me. They asked about you, needed a quick informal reference, said you'd helped with a signage project at a community center near Love Field back in the spring. My wife runs outreach there. A pause. She sent your deck to them. The fuselage hummed. My heartbeat named it music. I had no idea. They were impressed, he said. They wanted to know if the quiet kid who stayed late to stencil arrows on linoleum floors under flickering lights is the same Alex Turner on our flight tonight. His smile was a small sunrise. I told them yes. I gripped the portfolio like a railing, the cabin, the years, the tightness in my throat. All of it aligned into one thin, shaking line. He glanced toward the curtain, then back to me. I moved you forward for balance, he said. And then, softer, because balance is something people deserve, too. My breath stuttered out. Behind us, I could feel the shape of my sister's judgment like a storm cloud, heavy and inevitable. Ahead, something else gathered, quiet and immense. Captain Morales rose as the owner of 3B returned, offered me a steadying nod, and touched 2 fingers to the card still in my hand. We'll talk more later, he said. For now, keep that portfolio close. He disappeared toward the cockpit. The seatbelt sign chimed softly, a lullaby for the anxious. I stared at the stitched seam of the window shade and felt, for the first time that day, the sensation of a runway, not beneath me, but inside me, long, bright, ready. Somewhere in the middle of the country, under our carving path of light, tomorrow waited. And for the first time in a long time, I believed I was allowed to meet it on my feet. The seatbelt sign pinged overhead, a gentle chime that always made passengers glance upward, like waiting for divine approval. Outside, the jet nosed east into the night, slicing through unseen rivers of air. The lights of Texas had vanished. Below was only blackness. I pressed the card Captain Morales had given me against my palm, its ink warm from my grip. A reference, a connection I hadn't known existed. My chest lifted with something that wasn't quite joy yet, but it wasn't shame either. From behind the curtain, the low murmur of the main cabin leaked forward, the shuffle of carts, the rustle of foil lids. My sister's voice carried above the hum, tight and insistent. I didn't need the words to know the shape of them. Spinning control, stitching excuses, keeping the narrative hers. The plane jolted. Gasps scattered like coins tossed in a fountain. My water tipped slightly on the tray. A mother clutched her child closer, 2 rows behind me. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jordan's calm voice came through the PA, "we've hit some weather earlier than expected. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The fuselage trembled, then steadied. My heart followed, beating out a pattern like a sketching hand finding rhythm. That's when Vanessa appeared. She pulled the curtain aside with a snap, face lit by the overhead glare, eyes sharp with anger wrapped in a nervous smile for the watching passenger. She leaned down, her whisper more dangerous than any storm outside. "What did you say to the pilot?" I looked at her, then at the card still in my hand. Nothing he didn't already know. Her jaw tightened. "You can't keep doing this. Acting like the world owes you some special notice. You'll embarrass us. Again." Something inside me shifted, like a chair finally scraping into its rightful place. "No," I said, voice even. "For once, it's you who doesn't get to decide what I am in front of everyone." Her breath caught. Around us, curious eyes lingered. A businessman pretending to type slower. A teenager pretending not to listen. The tension between us was no longer hidden. It belonged to the aisle. Another sharp drop. Vanessa grabbed the seat back. Her polished veneer cracked, fear darting across her face before she smoothed it again. She turned to retreat, but Jordan intercepted, stepping forward with professional grace. "Ma'am, for safety, I'll need you to return to your seat," he said. His tone wasn't harsh, but it was final. Vanessa hesitated, then pulled the curtain closed with unnecessary force, vanishing back into the road. The turbulence eased, like the sky had delivered its verdict and moved on. I sat there, pulse quick but steady, staring at the captain's card again. Balance is something people deserve too. The words echoed louder than her accusations ever had. I opened my portfolio slowly, flipping to the project that had sparked the chain of events. Airport signage for people overwhelmed by noise and chaos, clear paths, softer tones, spaces where direction felt like a hand guiding, not pushing. I realized I had designed what I always wanted in life, a way through without shame. Passengers around me began talking again, whispers turning back into conversation. The child, 2 rows behind, giggled at a cartoon on a tablet, laughter like stitching across the cabin's frayed nerves. Jordan passed once more, paused at my row, and crouched slightly. "You okay?" I nodded. "Actually, yes. Good." He glanced at my open sketches. "Keep those handy. The captain will call for you once we're cruising smooth." He meant it. I closed the folder gently, fingers pressing the spine flat, and looked out the window. The clouds parted just enough for a scatter of stars to appear, sharp, endless, unbothered by turbulence. And that's when I understood. The night didn't erase you. It revealed you to yourself. Cruising altitude settled over the cabin like a blanket. The engines purred steady now, the turbulence fading to a memory. Lights dimmed, casting the aisle in a twilight glow. Passengers eased into the rhythm of flight. Movies glowing on seatbacks, pages turning, soft snores escaping tired travelers. I sat in 3A, my portfolio closed on my lap, the captain's card resting above it. The storm outside had been real, but the one inside me was louder. The years of Vanessa's cutting words, the doubt she'd sown into every corner of me. Yet something had shifted. For the first time, her voice wasn't the loudest in the room. The curtain swayed. Jordan appeared, leaning slightly so only I could hear. "Captain Morales is ready for," he said. My pulse jumped. I rose, careful not to let nerves tangle my steps. As I followed Jordan toward the cockpit, I felt eyes track me. Passengers curious, whispering, maybe even inventing their own stories about who I was and why the captain wanted me. At the cockpit door, Jordan pressed a button. The door unlocked with a muted click, and I stepped into a space few ever see mid-flight. The cockpit glowed with muted panels, dials alive in amber and green. 2 pilots sat side by side, framed by a windshield that revealed nothing but an ocean of night. Captain Morales turned, offering me a seat on the jump seat just behind them. "Alex," he said with the calm certainty of someone who'd spoken through storms and silence alike. I wanted to explain more clearly. Off the record, I eased into the seat, heart pounding. "I'm listening." He pointed at the horizon displayed on the main screen, the line of blue cutting between dark sky and darker earth. "Flying is balance. Too heavy in the wrong place, and the whole craft suffers. Too much weight aft. We trim endlessly. Too much forward, same issue. It's a constant act of correction. But when balance is right, even turbulence feels survivable." He paused, then looked back at me. "Life works the same way." I swallowed, unsure if he was speaking as a pilot or as someone who knew me better than chance allowed. "You didn't know I was part of the community center project," he continued, "but I saw what you did there. Stayed late, worked quiet, never asking for recognition. You gave people clarity when they were lost in confusion. That's not a small gift." My throat tightened. "Most days, it doesn't feel like much." "That's because someone has been convincing you otherwise," he said, his voice lowering. "Sometimes it's family, sometimes it's yourself. Either way, it's a lie." The co-pilot, a younger man with kind eyes, adjusted a dial but shot me a supportive glance. "He's right. Some lies stick worse than turbulence." I exhaled slowly, the truth of it piercing deeper than any insult Vanessa had thrown. Captain Morales leaned back, studying me. "Tomorrow, you walk into Miller & Hart with that portfolio. Don't undersell yourself. They already know your work speaks louder than introductions. You just need to stand in the room like you belong there, because you do." The words landed heavy, not because they were grand, but because they were simple, undeniable. "Thank you," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "You'll thank me by showing them who you are, not who someone else has told you to be." The cockpit fell into silence, punctuated by radio chatter, engine hum, and the steady tick of altitude changes. For the first time, I felt the rhythm of flight not as a passenger, but as someone who had been invited to understand its language. Finally, Captain Morales stood. "That's all I wanted to say. Go rest. Let the sky do the flying tonight." I rose, clutching my portfolio tighter, and stepped back into the cabin. The door sealed shut behind me, returning me to the world of passengers and trays, where most had no idea I had just heard words that could alter a lifetime. As I slid into my seat, Vanessa's eyes met mine from across the curtain gap. She looked unsettled, as though she'd seen me walk into one story and return in another. For once, I didn't flinch. The hum of the engines was steady, almost soothing. Most passengers had reclined into that twilight state between wakefulness and sleep. Reading lights glowed like scattered stars across the cabin. I sat in 3A, portfolio on my lap, the captain's words still echoing in my mind. "You belong there, but shadows don't fade so easily." Across the curtain, I could feel Vanessa's stare like a spotlight. She hadn't moved since I left the cockpit, her pride wounded, her narrative disrupted, and I knew, sooner or later, she would strike. It didn't take long. The curtain hissed open again, and Vanessa strode forward with her usual elegance, but the veneer was cracked. She bent close, her whisper sharp and rehearsed. "What are you playing at, Alex? Acting like you're someone important? You're embarrassing me in front of strangers." I looked at her calmly. "You keep saying that, but maybe you're just embarrassed by me existing outside your control." Her nostrils flared, but she kept her voice low, aware of the listening ears. "You're nothing without me. Don't forget who pays for the ticket, who makes the plan. You think the pilot cares about you? He's being polite." Before I could answer, Jordan appeared, his professional smile unwavering but his eyes keen. "Ma'am, I'll need you to return to your seat now. Service is about to begin." Vanessa hesitated, lips pressed tight. She turned, ready to unleash another barb, when the seatbelt sign pinged overhead again. The plane jolted, a sudden dip that stole the words from her mouth. Passengers gasped. Someone muttered a prayer. The turbulence returned, stronger this time. Lights flickered faintly. The fuselage rattled like a protest. Vanessa grabbed the seat back, her polished mask slipping for the briefest second. She looked small, afraid. I almost reached out. Almost. But then I remembered every whispered, "You'll embarrass us." every glance that turned me into less than I was. I let the silence answer her. Jordan guided her gently. "Please, for your safety." She retreated, forced to obey the same rules she had always used against me. When the cabin steadied, a ripple of laughter rolled from somewhere in the back, nervous, grateful. The tension broke. People resumed their movies, their drinks, their quiet attempts at sleep. I stared at the dark window, my reflection looking back at me. For the first time, I saw myself not as a shadow in someone else's story, but as the beginning of my own. Still, the storm outside wasn't done, and neither was the one between Vanessa and me. Because as the night deepened and the engines carried us closer to New York, I knew she wouldn't let this flight end without one final attempt to remind me of my place. Only now, my place was no longer where she thought it was. Midnight pressed against the cabin windows, a velvet dark broken only by the pinprick glow of distant towns far below. The aircraft hummed on, steady, reliable, but the tension between rows 3 and 22 was anything but calm. I had tried to lose myself in sketches, lines of color-coded signs, silhouettes of terminals, yet the scratch of pencil on paper couldn't drown out the inevitability of my sister. Vanessa had never been one to surrender a stage. It began with her voice, sharp enough to cut through the muted lull of sleeping passengers. "Excuse me! Excuse me!" she called, pressing the call button above her row. Her tone carried, deliberate, drawing eyes. "I need to speak with the captain about a seating error." Heads turned, screens paused mid-scene. Even the baby who had been dozing stirred at the sudden rise of sound. Jordan hurried down the aisle, face composed, but his movements brisk. "Ma'am," he said, kneeling slightly so his voice could stay calm. "The captain is occupied. What seems to be the problem?" "My brother," Vanessa announced, her words loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. She jabbed a finger toward the curtain where I sat beyond. "He manipulated his way to the front. He does this, plays the victim so people pity him. He doesn't deserve that seat." Murmurs rippled. Strangers' eyes slid toward me, curiosity sharp, sympathy muted by confusion. The story was being written again, and she was holding the pen. My cheeks burned, but I stayed still. For years, I had rushed to defend myself, to explain, to beg for dignity. Not this time. Jordan's voice remained steady. "Seating changes are made for operational reasons, not personal ones. He was asked to move, that's all." But Vanessa wasn't finished. She rose fully, ignoring the turbulence warning lights flickering overhead. "You don't understand. He's always been like this, always embarrassing the family, always making scenes. And now you've made him look like he matters." The cabin grew silent again. Even the hum of engines seemed to lean in. I stood. My legs trembled, but my voice, when it came, was clear. "You're right about one thing, Vanessa," I said, stepping into the aisle where every eye could see me. "I do matter." Gasps fluttered. Vanessa froze, her face taut with disbelief. "For years," I continued, "you've told me I'm less, that I should be quiet, invisible. But the truth is, the only embarrassment here is the way you treat people. And maybe you're afraid that if I stand tall, you'll have to face how small your words really are." A man in a business suit coughed softly, muttering, "Well said." A mother cradling her daughter nodded. Whispers of agreement trickled like currents through the rows. Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. For once, no words came. Her grip tightened on the seat back, knuckles white. The intercom crackled. Captain Morales's calm voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We've encountered smoother air. Please remain seated while service resumed. And remember, every passenger on this flight matters equally." The timing was surgical. Vanessa sank back into her seat, cornered not by me, but by the truth spoken from the cockpit itself. I sat again, my body shaking with adrenaline. The portfolio still lay open on my tray, sketches glowing faintly under the overhead light. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to close it. Let them see. Let them all see. The cabin relaxed slowly, conversations resuming, but the current had changed. I was no longer the background of someone else's script. I had spoken, and the silence had listened. The descent into New York began with a soft chime and a tilt of the nose. The cabin lights brightened slightly, stirring the half-asleep into awareness. Window shades lifted, revealing a quilt of city lights glittering against the Atlantic darkness. I pressed my forehead to the glass, watching the skyline sharpen into view, the jagged crown of Manhattan, bridges glowing like threads of fire. The city I had dreamed of for years was no longer an idea on a sketchpad. It was right there, waiting. Behind me, I could sense Vanessa's presence, like a shadow stretched long. She hadn't spoken since the confrontation. Perhaps she was rehearsing a new story, one where she remained the hero. But her silence told me enough. The power she had over me was unraveling, thread by thread. The wheels thudded against the runway. A ripple of relief washed through the cabin as applause broke out. Brief, polite, but real. I felt it differently this time. Not as background noise, but as a chorus that included me. When the seatbelt sign dinged off, the shuffle began. Overhead, bins clicked open, bags tugged down, coats slipped on. Vanessa moved quickly, as if escaping. She shot me one last look, sharp and cold, but it no longer pierced. It slid off like rain on glass. Jordan appeared, pausing beside me as the aisle clogged with restless passengers. "You held your ground," he said quietly. "Not easy to do at 30,000 feet. Or on the ground." I smiled, small but steady. "Thank you for everything." He nodded. "Good luck tomorrow. Something tells me you won't need it." As I stepped off the plane, the terminal air hit me with its usual mix of coffee, exhaust, and possibility. I slung my backpack over one shoulder, portfolio held firm in the other hand. At the gate exit, a familiar figure waited. Captain Morales, already out of uniform cap, his expression calm but purposeful. He extended a hand. "Alex, remember what I said. Don't undersell yourself." I shook his hand, the grip strong, anchoring. "I won't." He smiled, then turned to disappear into the crew corridor, swallowed by the flow of uniform. I walked toward the baggage claim, each step lighter than the last. My sister trailed behind somewhere, her footsteps sharp, but they no longer set the rhythm of mine. The city beyond the glass doors pulsed alive, its avenues humming with taxis and voices and endless chances. Tomorrow, I would sit in a room at Miller and Hart, lay my portfolio on the table and speak for myself. Not as an echo of someone else's judgment, not as an embarrassment, but as someone who had faced turbulence, both in the sky and in life, and had landed stronger. And as I pushed through the revolving doors into the crisp New York air, one thought carried me forward, steady and unshakable. Balance is something people deserve too.